So Mitch and I have broken down the work items for 1.8 into these 4 categories, and that is how we are viewing our roadmap. And I wanted to take everyone through what the roadmap is and who is assigned to each item and see if we think everything on this is correct, if anyone wants to volunteer for things. So these are the 4 epics. So the first epic is our traditional troubleshooting stuff. Istio cuddle commands that that work with for the user. These are the user-facing commands, and I don't think the shared view of XDS events is here. I mean, it's got no sort of issue or owner. I didn't mention that it didn't have an owner. Let me add that.
Yeah, I've been working on that as far as ownership is concerned, Ed.
Do you want to own it?
Yeah, I'm happy to own that.
Perfect. Okay. So we've completed one item so far. The using tokens now works perfectly, I believe. You don't have to do any certificate stuff anymore. It uses the secure endpoint. And I didn't put it on here, but I should, that there is a new work item, which I think we should do for this, which is to make that the default.
Ed, can I ask you, are the tokens also added to regular commands that you go to the debug endpoint? There was recently some discussion about the fact that debug endpoint is insecure and we need to either shut it down or move it to HTTPS plus tokens because some security people complained. And I think John was looking into a fix for 1.7 or
right. So we could backport the token stuff to 1.7. It's very isolated. The control plane already does it, so the CLI could easily get that. It's like a 2 or 3 line change to make XDS the default for version and proxy status, which are the 2 commands that we have working with XDS, and that would eliminate version would let us close down port 14, and proxy status would let us close one of the debug endpoints.
And to clarify a bit, I'm not asking about using XDS, I mean, all this stuff over XDS that you added. I'm talking about a small patch in 1.7, and I don't know how far we need to backport it, where the debug endpoint, which now it's on /88 or 15, whatever, on the same plain text port, it's switched to the HTTPS port and requires JWT authentication. Because the concern people had was that right now that is exposed without authentication, and we could add this JWT authentication and move it to HTTPS with relatively small effort without changing everything else.
If you put that in 1.7.2 control plane, I can probably put it in 1.7.2 or 1.7.3 Istio cuddle.
Okay, let me check with John because he was looking at this and let's sync up between us. Yep.
So I don't want to start working on it until there's a daily build of the control plane that has it, because I don't want to work in parallel.
Okay, but I got it. I'll sync with him and yep.
Okay, so this wasn't on our roadmap, but I think it should be there. We should, for 1.8, we should definitely stop using the debug endpoint, maybe for 1.7.2. And I can easily own that, although this particular one I have marked as, I think, good first issue. So I'm trying to get more people to join the work group and contribute. The make file has been marked at P0. I wanted the environments work group to take it over since they do the make file for the other stuff. Stephen Dake thinks that Istio cuddle should make these certificates.
And I agree with you.
Oh, you agree?
Absolutely.
Do you think it should use SSH libraries or should it invoke SSH commands?
Not SSH. So just use the exact same code that is in the makefile. I mean, it's relatively easy. We already have code in one of the utilities.
The makefile calls keygen and all that. Should I be doing the same thing, calling command lines, or should I be calling libraries?
No. Coding library. I mean, reusing code that already exists because the code in the makefile, it's a reproduction of what we are doing in one of the libraries.
All right. You might point me at the library.
Yeah,
So,
it's a security tools. It's in security tools. That, remember, when we launched 1.6, we told people to use security tools, some other stuff, and that was a tool that was doing this kind of stuff. It was generating. I'll point you. Okay.
Okay. So, in theory, I could do this, or we can get a volunteer to do it.
Or Iris or someone who worked on the makefile or is familiar with this. I mean, or someone for security. It doesn't have to be you personally, but it should be in your cutter.
I have looked at the makefile. I could do it. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
So restoring the Istio cuddle auth-in command is a big deal. We marked it as P0 because we get so much demand for it. And the security work group was working with us, I believe. Is that not what you said, Mitch? You went there and they wanted to restore it with us?
Yes, that's a qualified yes. They had some ideas about how it might need to change in order to continue to be relevant, given the changes to the API. But they had the same commitment as we have to the use case.
Okay. Do they have someone who knows auth-in better than me who can write a debug endpoint for it?
I assume so, but we did not talk about individual ownership. It was meant to be part of their roadmap. I was not able to attend their roadmap review, so it's possible they've already assigned an owner.
Okay. The Istio cuddle issue is not linked to any issue they have. So I put a comment asking them to take it over, but it's unclear if they just do the back end and tell me how to do the front end, or if they do the front end.
One question that came up in that discussion was whether there is internal data from Pilot needed to answer this question, or whether there's sufficient information to answer it within the scope of an analyzer, especially now that analyzers share a code base with Pilot and can be built off of common logic.
So before we say that, I want to say that several items down is this item we marked as P2 to tell you what the TLS configuration is by looking at Envoy configuration. So that is one possibility. As a pilot endpoint or recreating that logic ourselves, it does not matter to me where the logic is. In the past, when I have tried to write code in Istio Cuddle, Sriram and other TOC people have said it's better to put it into the control plane where it gets maintained by the real group. If you do it on your own, it's going to eventually diverge. So that's my only thought on that.
Yeah, so the analyzers don't live inside of Istio Cuddle, thankfully. They live inside of the Pilot code base, even though we run them inside of Istio Cuddle. So it's a nice compromise between the two. It's worth investigating. It may not be viable, but it's worth looking into.
Well, I'd be happy to help in any kind of way. I'm good at writing analyzers, but I just don't know the auth-in stuff.
Yep, me too.
And of course, that same logic will be used by Istio Cuddle Describe. We have a auth-z improvement that they are already working on, and I don't know the status on. I sent a message to Yang Minzu. They have several PRs that have merged, but I'm not sure. It's still open, so I'm not sure if it's the way it looks hasn't changed. So I don't know what the status is on that, but we have to track that down. Other CLI issues. Here's one I tagged good first issue, which is a Istio Cuddle command to say the Envoy version. People have asked about that. What version of Envoy am I on? It's just look at the bootstrap and report, yeah, you're on Envoy version, whatever. Trying to get people to start with easy things to join the group. And I just mentioned this idea of looking at the Envoy configuration to tell if it's strict, permissive, and what the root of trust is. Maybe output the stuff from certs as well. Oh, and this, I moved this to the wrong place. That's why I didn't move it. And this item, which I still have not designed yet, is to cuddle trace to tell if two pods can talk to each other. Since this is about writing some documentation and I've taken it over, I think we don't need to talk about it. Okay, the next item is the familiar tooling item. So this one merged this morning. Istio Cuddle now takes, or the next daily build will take, a optional type, same way kubectl does. So you can say proxy status deployment HTTP VIN, and you won't need to know the exact name of your pod, which I think is super handy.
And that's merged now, hasn't it? Oh yeah, you've got the checkbox. Never mind.
It merged this morning. We had previously wanted a command to turn on and off injection for namespace. Lynn had asked for this. John Howard had said no, so I've tentatively crossed it off, but we can decide if we want to keep this or not. Do we have opinions on this here today among us four? It's easy to use, kubectl label to turn on and off injection. I'm not sure people, when they are thinking about Istio injection, are thinking about labels to know to do that. Maybe more discussion is needed.
I think maybe what's needed there is more along the lines of an analyzer to make sure that the labels that you've specified make sense.
We have a label that says you haven't turned injection on.
Yeah.
What is...
well, naming a revision that doesn't exist, for instance, would be
so,
one.
What does it mean doesn't exist?
I originally wrote code to do that, but it only got the inventory from the control plane. So talk about that.
Okay.
So let's move past this right now. For analyze, we have Jason. This is yours. The line numbers, is that still good?
Yeah, I believe so. We have the PR merged. This is more about the improvements. I would put it as a P2 for now, because the functionality is there. It's just a different, improve the developer experience to add the line number. So it's not like a required.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, I have written, and it's merged the virtual service match duplicate analyzer, which is nice. It both reports duplicate matches and matches that are dead because a previous match took care of them. So that should be interesting and gives us some informational messages rather than the warnings. And Jason, we have this alignment of messages. How's that?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. We have the PR, and I think right now it needs to rebase. I will rebase that and work on that. I think the PR is there already.
Excellent.
Yep.
So the next item is to make revision unneeded in the CLI. So this item, for example, if you do proxy status mypod, it doesn't know currently which control plane, if you have more than one, to talk to. And this This item is for it to be able to figure that out. It's sort of stuck right now because there's two strategies. One is we could try to put metadata such as a label giving the endpoint onto the pod that Istio would use. The other is that Shriram's future PR that lets you talk to the control plane via the sidecar would be an even better way to do this. So this is sort of blocked on that. Make sense?
Yeah, Ed, I think that makes sense. And I think that's actually also along the lines of the plan for proxy status. Worked on some design with John Howard this last week on ways that we might be able to avoid using that large message bus that we discussed a few weeks ago. And so for proxy status, one of the ways to avoid that is actually to leverage the pod's communication channel into the control plane.
And yeah, I think that's great. If we, I should point out that if you look at your pods, I mean, it takes, you can just do a, get pods, get this metadata. You don't want to ask every pod. You don't want to talk to the XDS in every pod. You want to talk to the unique XDSs among your pods. So it would be great if there was something on the metadata that would let us know the endpoint or something unique about the control plane so that we wouldn't make duplicate calls. If we saw there was only one control plane, 3 pods talking to it, I don't want to ask 3 times and get the same answer.
Makes sense.
Did you and John talk about that?
We did not. We were focused mostly on the individual pod scenario.
Okay. I want to know if 2 pods share the same control plane so that I can simplify that. So we have a long-standing item to list the control planes. I know Costin often objects. There's 2 possible strategies I see for listing the control planes. And I'm willing to do either one. One strategy is that we put a Istio operator, meaningless, read-only Istio operator in every cluster that just sort of says this is a control plane that this cluster knows about, and then this command is just listing those control planes. The other method is that we could look at the injectors and say, well, you have 2 injectors and you have 4 namespaces. These are the namespaces and these are the injectors for those namespaces. Both of those I think would be great. Either one.
I want to mention that we are planning to add beta support for Helm again, Helm 3, because a lot of customers use Helm 3 and don't want to use Istio operator or Istio install. So I would prefer the second option. And also this works perfectly with externally managed control planes, because no matter what, you'll need to have the mutating webhook. So if you're just looking at the mutating webhook configs, you will get the accurate list of control planes.
All right. So I'm gonna cross off then the IOP method of doing this, because I don't think the Helm people are going to want to create a read-only IOP just as information for these other communities.
And also it is possible already to run Istio on other environments except Kubernetes. So for example, I'm running it in Cloud Run, and there are other VMs and other things where you can deploy the Istio. So I think, yeah, again, and operator, the operator is particularly inconvenient for managed control planes or operator based like central Istio, because again, it provides user too much power over the install. So I think we'll probably need to deprecate it somehow.
Okay. So I'm looking for a volunteer on this who wants to either write or do an RFC for how it should look. So I think it should just sort of list your injected namespaces and your control planes and tell you what the match is. If no one wants to do it, I can take it over.
So to be clear, you mean you are going to list mutating webhook configs and from them look for the name, whatever name you are using, and from there you get the URL of the control plane, the actual URL, which can be
So,
external or internal.
yes. So and I'm not sure exactly if I have all the pieces together. What I want to do is let the user know which namespace are injected, which aren't, which control plane is set up for each namespace, and if there's any control planes, any injectors that aren't currently labeled for any namespace.
Yep. That's a perfect solution, because that will give you all options. And don't forget, there is also the case where we configure injection for everything without label. We still support that. So you can designate a control plane to be the default, and then namespaces do not have to be labeled. They will automatically be picked unless they opt out.
I had forgotten that, so let me add that as a note right now.
Many people do.
Remind me, how do I tell that?
So you still look at mutating webhook configs, and there is some different filter, and we can probably put an annotation, or we can put something in the mutating webhook to make it easier for you. So part of this design, which I think you volunteered, because so part of this design, you should put some requirements on the installer of what additional metadata or annotations you want to put there to make it easy. Right now you get it by looking at the explicit selector, which is a bit tricky to understand.
Okay, that sounds great. So Mitch, tell me about this item. Istio wait for control planes and XDS and things.
So this, along with the troubleshooting API and the federated view of XDS, I think will be dependent on the work that I did with John Howard last week.
Okay.
I think we have a path forward, and you should expect to see some design docs beginning next week. I don't know if wait will be among the first design docs, but I'm not blocked.
Okay.
What does wait mean, really? I mean, normally I would expect that the mutating webhook will be created after the control plane is ready. So what will be the purpose of wait? Can you just look for the mutating webhook presence?
So wait has nothing to do with the readiness of a control plane or install time. Remember, wait allows you to see when a given config has been distributed to all proxies.
I see. Yes. Yeah, that one.
It's sort of a lightweight version of status for those who do not have it enabled.
Okay. So what you are using?
Today, we use the debug API. What we will begin to use is the config maps that underlie the debug API.
Okay.
The last item under this epic is the Envoy extension dashboard, which we're supposed to be doing together with telemetry. And I have been going to their meetings, but we haven't started work on that yet. And by the way, I've been getting good at WebAssembly in assembly script. So if anybody is trying to do assembly script, I'm happy to talk you through it. The first day is tough. So the next epic we have are those issues that we think affect cloud operators and administrators. So hopefully this first item is the non-controversial promote canary. The idea is we need an RFC for a command that rewrites the injector config maps so that they handle the default label and restarts the pods that have a sidecar that are run by that control plane. So say your book info and your default namespace are on control plane master, and control plane canary has your HTTP bin pod. If you were to say canary is the new master, we want to restart the do a kubectl rollout type operation after rewriting the injector config map, so that or the webhook and the config map, so that it gets picked up, so that it restarts all of your old stuff on the canary. The canary becomes the new master. We're looking for volunteers, and we're hoping that it's someone who works well with environments, which probably is me, but if anyone wants to do this, let me know.
Yeah, Ed, I've been talking with Martin about stuff along these lines. I think I can put my name down on this one. I don't know that we necessarily want to restart the pods on behalf of the user. That's usually a dangerous operation, but rather report to the user which pods need to be restarted and maybe even give them an example command on how to do that.
I was thinking along the lines of a rollout minus true, like you would need an optional flag to restart them. But you're right. It may be that this thing just says, maybe it outputs the YAML to restart something or the bash to restart something, and you just paste it in, you just pipe it into your kubectl or something.
Yep. In particular, promoting a canary is not an atomic operation, right? There's multiple steps to it. So I think what's valuable is providing visibility to the user of, okay, here are the steps and here's where you are in the process.
And maybe here's the pods that aren't yet on the canary. So we have these great proxy status that lists all the pods that are on a canary, but there's no way to list all the pods in a namespace and say which control plane is doing them, right? I mean, it'd be great if there was a way to add that as a column to get pods.
Yep.
And in theory, you could add it with a custom column, but there's no metadata that tells you which control plane you have. Okay, the next item is the control plane health check. We have a work item for the control plane health check. I own it. I haven't yet synced with John, but that's the plan. This item, admin can non-destructively upgrade control planes. This item is not about the stuff that Lynn was talking about last week, where a user wants to make some changes to some things but not deploy a new control plane. This is for administrators who want to pick up any customizations from their current cluster and use that as their Istio operator. So this option is just to add this profile from cluster Boolean that sort of says, go out and get my current configuration and try to use that. It should just be a few lines of code. But it's not going to be the default because many people hate it. Many people feel you should always create from a well-known checked into version control. And we have one small item, which is to set the log level on the control plane. Nobody has it. It looks pretty simple. People are saying it's just some sort of put. I don't know. If anyone wants to take this over, I would love for a volunteer to step forward. And if not, I will take it over.
Ed, is the idea there to restart the to restart the control plane with a new log level?
I think Control Z already does this, right? So I think it's a command line version of setting the log level without restarting the control plane.
And that's not going to be removed with the removal of the debug API, Costin?
So it's on the Control Z endpoint, right? I mean, isn't 9876 the Control Z endpoint?
Control Z is the same situation with debug. We can preserve it. We can keep using it if you put the jot in the istio command.
Okay.
Will the jot be in the istio for Control Z, and when will it be coming?
So the istio, I mean, there are two sides. One is on the server side, what's the jot.
All right. So on this,
and
all right, so
on the server side, yeah, let me check with John. But at this point, I think the thinking, at least in environments, or at least between me and John, I don't know, can generalize, but is that For 1.8, we still have the debug. We cannot remove it because too many people depend, but we are going to require JOT and TLS for it. Or Istio or Cube proxy, if you, because it will also be bound on port localhost on the old port.
Okay.
And I think Control Z can follow the same pattern.
Okay, that's good to know. And if there is an issue for it on the control plane, I will link that issue to this item.
Okay.
But I think people will like that. Okay, the last epic we have today is the troubleshooting features, which are mostly owned by Mitch. So we made the only must-have to make this approved document, and this item is old enough that it was owned by the gang of three, Mitch, myself, and Liam. Do we still think this is the right group to make this document? Mitch, do you want to make one first and have us review it, or how do we want to proceed on this item?
Yeah, I can take ownership of that.
All right. And do we have an ETA on when we might review that at one of these meetings?
It will probably encompass a few documents because, like I said, these things are tied together between the troubleshooting API, some of the commands we want to run, that sort of thing. But I expect you should begin to see the first of the documents next week.
Excellent. So put it on our calendar to review as soon as we can.
Will do.
We have made just the P2, if we can get it done, implementing that API. I think we have 2 work items for that. So we have this one to sort of create this API, and this one to make an MVP of it. I'm not sure one or both of these are needed. So Mitch, you could clean up this particular issue if these are the same thing, or if they're different. You could put more words about it.
Okay.
And the last item on this epic is distribution status, which we made a P1. Is that still a P1? And
so.
the link that I have for this links to the perf test of it, not to anything about distribution itself.
Okay, yeah, that, excuse me, that's probably a mistake on my part. I will try to get an overall issue tracking work on distribution status.
Okay. So we have completed everything on the agenda. I believe we are done. Does anyone have any other items they want to schedule for next week or the rest of the month? Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.